Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is John Nagl. I'm the Minerva Professor in the History Department at the U.S. Naval Academy. I think it's the first time I've said that in front of an audience this large. And I'm the former President of the Center for New American Security and now a Senior Fellow here. For the past 10 months, I've been enormously proud to be part of a collaboration between the German Ministry of Defense and CNAS that has worked very hard to find lessons from our country's shared experiences conducting counterinsurgency on the ground in Afghanistan. We've just moments ago concluded the fourth of the 4 conferences we've held on this subject, and we're delighted to have the German Minister of Defense, Thomas de Maizière, to share his thoughts on the subject with us this morning. Dr. de Maizière has a deep and abiding interest in issues of national security policy. He was, in fact, born to the subject. His father was the Inspector General of the Bundeswehr. He grew up on military bases in Germany, and he himself is a former mechanized infantryman, I understand, sir. And myself, as an armor officer, a former armor officer and veteran of 2 wars who fought with mechanized infantry in those wars, I'm very pleased that we have this combined arms team coming together this morning, sir, to share more learning on the problems that our 2 nations face together. Dr. de Maizière is also a student of law and of history. He played a very important role in the unification of Germany at the end of the Cold War, and then served in the state of Saxony as Minister of Finance, Minister of Justice, and Minister of the Interior. He then moved on to the federal level, serving as federal minister and head of the federal chancellery from 2005 until 2009, Federal Minister of the Interior, and since March 2011, Federal Minister of Defense. He spent this week visiting German forces engaged in training with American forces all over our country, another sign of the close partnership between American and German units on the ground in real combat operations in Afghanistan, and here training, preparing to deter future wars. And we are enormously pleased now to have him here to discuss counterinsurgency and Afghanistan, experiences, strategies, and perspectives. And sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Nagl, and thank you for this kind introduction. Yes, I'm proud to be First Lieutenant of the German Army in reserve. This was my highest rank. Now I'm something like a commander. But I'm proud to have this position. And I'm very proud speaking after General Petraeus. I had the honor and the pleasure on Monday night to hand him over the German highest medal we can offer to foreigners. One of his predecessors was General Tanner, who organized the Berlin airlift during the blockade. And I was very pleased that he, just a minute ago, had this medal on his suite. So thank you very much, and I'm very much welcome this invitation and the occasion to give this speech nearly at the end of my visit in America. You're right, I was in Hollow Man and in El Paso and saw how close the links are between the American armed forces and the German Bundeswehr on all levels you can think about. And we are proud to host American soldiers and troops in Germany, and we are proud to be good hosts. And on the other hand, I saw how welcomed German troops and their families in El Paso and Hollow Man are in the whole city. It's not only the Oktoberfest that what they organize, it's much more. They are integrated, their like at home, and this was great to see. I'm now afterwards leaving to Boston. There's the annual German conference, and I will give a speech there together with others on the German role in Europe and Germans' responsibility in the field of security, and then the visit is finished. Henry Kissinger once said, "Modern armies fail if they don't win. Insurgents win until they lose." Counterinsurgency has quite rightly enjoyed a remarkable renaissance. More has been written about counterinsurgency in the past 5 years than in the previous 50. What we have learned from the discussions of the last few months and years, that counterinsurgency is complex and it's often controversial. Moreover, counterinsurgency polarizes. Algeria, Malaya, the Philippines or Vietnam, our history books are full of examples of insurgency and counterinsurgency. Examples that do not always evoke positive connotations, either in terms of their military success or in terms of their political context. You see, colonial wars, foreign rule, proxy wars in the days of East-West conflict, and even current brutal wars of oppression by dictatorial regimes against their own people are also referred to in connection with counterinsurgency. In my opinion, the possession of the political and legal legitimacy to take action against the insurgents must always be the precondition of any kind for counterinsurgency. Perhaps you think that's typical German. Perhaps it is. We are proud to think so. But I think it's not only an ethical or legal condition. It is. But I firmly believe, in addition, the decisive precondition for military success too. There is another crucial lesson we have learned from the study initiated by the German Ministry of Defense and the Institute for Security Policy of the University of Kiel in April 2011, and Professor Krause is just among us. With this study, there he is, yeah. With this study, we primarily pursue 3 goals. Firstly, to promote in-depth debate on counterinsurgency in the political sphere, basing it on scientific findings. Secondly, to analyze and assess historical developments and trends in counterinsurgency in order to draw conclusions for future crises and conflicts. And thirdly, to develop a security concept that offers options for interdepartmental action at both national and international level. This is really the main issue examined in the counterinsurgency study. Ladies and gentlemen, politically, counterinsurgency operations are key to the adoption of a comprehensive approach to security. And I heard that General Petraeus just mentioned this as well a couple of minutes ago. Security has changed fundamentally in the past few years. Today, security is more complex, more interdependent, and more multidimensional than it used to be. I'm convinced that an integrated approach to security is the key to any effective protection within a whole of government security provision system at both national and international level. We must focus on 3 major questions. How are we going to develop an integrated approach to security? What might prevent us from implementing it with success? And what should we do better in the future? Whenever I visit Afghanistan, I'm always impressed by the dedication, the professionalism, the courage, and the bravery of our troops. The mission in Afghanistan is the biggest mission under the umbrella of the United Nations. We know all too well which nation is bearing the brunt of our common mission. Let me make one thing clear at this point. The force and the energy, as well as the conviction and willingness to make sacrifice the US have devoted for more than a decade to stability, security, and peace in Afghanistan are impressive in every respect. Germany has been committed to our mission in Afghanistan since 2002. Germany and the United States share the same beliefs and goals. However, the preconditions for Germany and the US were entirely different. When ISAF began, all the experience of the Bundeswehr had been gained in the previous stability operations in the Balkans. At first, that seemed to be sufficient. For the initial ISAF mandate was based on a UN Security Council resolution that reflected the optimistic expectations and hopes of the Bonn Conference number 1. The mission of the Bundeswehr was to support Afghanistan's governmental institutions in maintaining security in and around Kabul. That was it. And the A in ISAF stands for assistant forces. Combat operations, however, instability operations were a completely new experience for us. They were new to the soldiers on the ground, but also new to the German people and government. Hindsight is easier than foresight. Yet, even in hindsight, there remain many questions. Do we have significantly underestimated the role and the possibilities of the Taliban? And why? Did we really have a functioning interim government and at least a reasonably intact government security apparatus in place to rely on? What is really prudent to limit ourselves in such a fragile environment by leaving just a small footprint in and around the capital? Today, we know that we have been too optimistic, by far, in our assessment of the situation. We had to learn that our initial goals were not achievable. One of the reasons for our failure in this is the Afghan culture, which is completely unfamiliar to us. Another reason is the fact that the traditional Afghan tribal society differs fundamentally from our concept of social coexistence. Despite an ever-increasing use of resources and an intensification of our military commitment, we witnessed a spiral of violence in the country. The developments towards a warlike situation hit us ill-prepared. And, unlike many of our allies, we first also had to gain experience with asymmetric warfare. Death, injury, civilian casualties, and insidious attacks have posed military and political challenges to us. And not only to us. But we learned quickly. Systematically, we have adopted our forces' equipment and training to the situation on the ground. And we have changed from being an army for operations into being an army in operations. Today, Germany is the third largest contributor of troops for ISAF, and as the lead nation, as you all know, in the northern region. Command soldiers from 18 nations, including several thousand Americans, for the first time in history. And today, the German army is able to fight and able to succeed in combat. And yet, it is not sufficient to focus on the use of armed forces alone. Lisbon and London stand for a change of strategy by NATO and the international community. They stand for the realization that asymmetric conflicts such as one in Afghanistan cannot be resolved by military means alone. Stability and peace can only be achieved by means of interdepartmental efforts in which both non-governmental organizations and the local people are involved. The two German-led provincial reconstruction teams are a core element of our commitment. The two German-led provincial reconstruction teams, PRT as we call them, are one key element of our engagement. Last year, we had relieved both PRTs of military tasks, leaving them more time and resources for civilian tasks. These are paramount tasks aimed at improving governance and economic development. Today, German PRTs pool the means and possibilities of governmental and non-governmental organizations and agencies. Even so, soldiers remain indispensable, particularly in view of the uneasy security situations. What we learned is the following: there is no development without security. Hence, there is no lasting security without adequate development. These are two sides of the same medal. With our commitment to the build-up of the Afghan security forces, we are enabling the Afghans to assume responsibility for security themselves. Still, the international community must be prepared to continue its military commitment in Afghanistan beyond 2014, although with a different setup. We can underline this in Chicago with a clear statement on a post-2014 NATO plan for the support of Afghanistan. One of the issues to be discussed will be the question how to secure financial sustainability of the Afghan security forces. Afghanistan will not be able to fund them on its own in the foreseeable future. Therefore, it is not only a question of defining a realistic strength for these security forces. You know the proposal of around about 230,000 troops, and police, altogether Afghan security forces. It's also a question of sharing the burden posed by the need to provide the Afghan government financial and to maintain them. And this we can learn from the experiences the Soviet Union made. We do not believe that this is only up to the alliance to meet this need. The funding of the future Afghan security forces being in the interest of the entire international community as well. The mission in Afghanistan has had a significant impact of the German Bundeswehr. We have learned our lessons from this mission also with regard to our reorientation of our armed forces. The Bundeswehr may become smaller, but better and more effective. And it will consistently be organized on the basis of operational requirements and capabilities. It will be fit for covering the entire task and capability spectrum. The use of the armed forces in crisis prevention and management is and will remain the factor determining the Bundeswehr structure. What we need are robust forces that can be deployed in joint operations, that can contend with escalation, and that at the same time are of a sufficient strength to be assigned for operations in more than one theater. To master the challenges of the 21st century and the profound change of the nature of military conflicts, we must be foresighted, comprehensive, and multilateral in our approach. We must establish a shared concept of preventive security and also share the responsibility for it. David Petraeus once said, insurgencies, like in Iraq, are the wars of thinkers. And he's right. We must discuss our strategies together, evaluate our experiences, also scientifically, identify weak points and the lack of success, even when it hurts, and then draw out conclusions from there. We have to develop analytic tools, build multinational networks, and bring together military, civilian, and academic experience, like today. This is a must, not only for counterinsurgency, but for all kinds of military operations in the future. Thank you very much.
The Minister has kindly agreed to take questions, and we have about a half an hour to do that. I'm going to abuse the chair and ask the first. Mr. Minister, I was pleased to hear of your commitment to the security of Afghanistan after 2014, something I agree with very strongly. You spoke of the need for a financial commitment. Could you also talk about the non-financial requirements that you see being necessary to help Afghanistan in 2015 and beyond?
Well, the first task is to organize a withdrawal. This is, so far, an underestimated task from that region. Then, when we have the figure of the number of troops, sustainable troops and policemen in Afghanistan beyond 2014, then we have to organize a process from the number which we have now to the future number. Our goal is, for the end of this year, to reach 350,000 members of Afghan security forces. Now the American proposal is 230,000. We will discuss it. But whatever the result is, it's less than 350,000. And my concern is what to do then with 120,000 from us educated policemen and troops. What are they going to do? Who is paying for them? What could they do? So we need not only a timetable, how many years are necessary to reach the new number of Afghan security forces, but as well a plan what to do with those who will not belong to these Afghan national security forces. A huge challenge. Then we will and should stay together beyond 2014 in a different attitude, in a different number, but hopefully very much coordinated. What sort of education will follow? What about maintenance? Who is responsible for maintenance? The Afghan procurement. Do they need help there? What sort of procurement will they get? It's not useful that every country leaves the stuff which we don't need anymore. And then you have different types of vehicles, different types of guns, different types of whatever you can think about. You need a consistent procurement for this army, and a maintenance, and a logistic organization for them. Then we have to make decisions about the infrastructure. For example, Maizière Sharif. Who will run it? Atta, the president of Afghanistan? Is this an international base or a division of labor for that? It's a huge airport, very effective. Who will run it? And then we need a concept for those who are not military people, but those who are working closely together with them. For example, wo ist mein also Fluglotsen, so, was würde man da sagen? Air Controllers. Air Policing. Geologie. And things like that. So there is a lot to do, and education is only the code word for that. And perhaps not until Chicago, but at least this year we have to, up to the end of this year, we have to plan for all of that in a coordinated manner. And this will include German engagement as well on a lower level. That's for sure.
Yes, sir. And we have microphones available, and I'll give the first question to my friend, Professor Gail Maddox, also from the Naval Academy. Yeah. And we would ask that you introduce yourself, although
that would be nice, yeah.
Yes, I'm Gail Maddox, and I teach at the U.S. Naval Academy. And I was just wondering if you could, especially for the Americans here, talk a little bit about the Bundeswehr transformation. And where is it going in the future? And what kinds of missions are you then trying to, would you anticipate for Germany in the future? Thank you.
Yes, I will, but I have to leave in a couple of minutes. Normally this would took time for hours. Well, the new Bundeswehr will be an army without conscription. This is a deep change, not only for the Bundeswehr, but for the society as well. In the end, we've had around about 55,000 conscript soldiers. This is not so much. Just to give you in comparison, we've had 55,000 conscript soldiers among more than 80 million people. Austria, with a conscript army, has 30,000 conscript soldiers among 8 million people. So this was the result of our conscript army, with 6 months' time for conscription. And all the military experts said, well, it's nice to have, but it's not really, you can't use those soldiers. They are perhaps trained, they can perhaps stand in the right way. They have quite a good order in their rooms. That's not bad, by the way. They're doing sports. But that's it. And it was very expensive to educate those conscript soldiers. Around about 20 to 30,000 people were only involved in education, those conscript soldiers. So all this together reduced the ability to have troops in mission. So this is number one. Then second, we raised our level of ambition up to 10,000, and I mean sustainable missions. Sustainable means more than 1 year. Some of the concepts of our European allies mean sustainability, and they plan less than 1 year. This makes a great difference in the numbers of soldiers and troops. So 10,000 in 2 major operations, one as a leading nation, and in addition a couple of smaller ones. Except of national actions to free Geiselmen, but hostages. All these missions are based on a multilateral NATO-based approach or European approach. So interoperability and all these things of operation planning is crucial for us. Afghanistan is not the model for the new Bundeswehr. It can happen again, but we must foresee and organize all kinds of missions which are likely to happen. In Germany there's a discussion, well, you are trimming, kann man das sagen? You are trimming the Bundeswehr only for new Afghan missions. This is not the case. But on the other hand, we cannot say, well, Afghanistan will never happen. So we need a wide and broad range of missions and preparations. Then we are reconstructing the ministry. We're reducing the ministry from 3,500 down to 2,000. I'm going to decide to strengthen the position of the CHOT. The Army Chief, the Air Chief, and the Navy Chief will not belong anymore to the ministry. There's a huge lot of change among what we call Streitkräftebasis. What that's in English?
Basis of the forces.
The basis of the forces. Logistics, telecommunication, and things like that. We will reduce the number of procurement and armaments we have, or plan to buy. Less tanks, less airplanes, less ships, but sufficient and payable. We tried to bring together the military planning process with the budget planning process, which was nearly separated. Only this is quite new, and not only in Germany. And we have to reduce the number of soldiers, we have to, and troops, we have to, this is a reconstructing, and we have to look for a good recruitment. And there we need two types of troops. We need, or what we want to have is perhaps quite singular. We call it Freiwilliger Wehrdienst, so it's a voluntarily service duty. So it seems to be a contradiction, but we want to address those who would like to serve the country and not becoming soldiers forever or for a long period. So for 1 year up to nearly 2 years, they are invited to serve the country. When they serve more than 1 year, they can be part of missions if they want to. And the other group, we need professional soldiers and what we call Zeitsoldat, long-term serving soldiers, 12 years, 16 years, 8 years, and so on. And the relation is very interesting. The relation between those long-time serving soldiers and professional soldiers is 2/3 to 1/3. Only 1/3, and this is the case now in the Bundeswehr as well, only 1/3 of the troops are professional, long-life professional soldiers and troops. Perhaps this is typical German tradition as well, but we are so far well advised to do so. I'm not happy with a 55-year-old Mannschaftsdienstgrad, enlisted soldier who is not able to become a sergeant with health conditions which are normal when you are 55. I don't want any of those guys in the German Bundeswehr. So they have to leave earlier, but with an excellent education, that they have a new career in the civil society, and we were quite successful on that so far. 98% of our long-time soldiers found a job when they left the Bundeswehr, even when we had high rates of unemployment. This is really a success story. So these are some descriptions of what we are going to do. The decisions are made. They are very much respected and accepted, including the opposition. But now the day-to-day work starts. The details are complicated. Nobody wants to move. Everyone wants to have more money, and you have to fit all the things together. So now this is now a complicated situation, but the process is irreversible and on a good way.
I'm struck by how similar the challenges are. Can we get a microphone to this gentleman here, please?
Sir, Major.
Wait for the mic, please.
Good morning, sir. Major Phil McGovern, U.S. Army, seconded to the State Department. After 2014, do you foresee an agreement being agreed for ISAF or a successor to continue coordinating security advice and assistance to Afghanistan? And based on your remarks a couple minutes ago, do you foresee that footprint extending out at some level and echelon to the regions? And third, do you foresee agreement on this issue at Chicago or one of the summits soon thereafter?
Yes, I foresee those agreements, and we need them. But my main interest now is not to have agreements, but to have a concept what should be written in agreements. That's the first step, and this is now our homework to do among the allies and with those who are not members of parliament. For example, Australia is ready to maintain their troops in Afghanistan beyond 2014 on a very much lower level, including special forces. Because perhaps on a certain level we need just to be assured a little combat role for those who stay to protect others. And we have to organize that. So this remark of Australia is very much welcomed, of course. This has to be organized as well and put into agreements with the Afghan government. But first it's our coordination, our homework to make a plan for that. And this will not be ready until until Chicago. But what we are going to plan has to be at least, we need tendencies in Chicago. We have discussions, for example, if it's necessary in Chicago to have a number of international troops beyond 2014. And what would be the best time to fix this number? Perhaps Chicago is too early for that. But again, a number must be the consequence of a concept, not the other way around. And so this is a lot of planning work this year. And then 2013 and 14 we have to implement it.
I think we have time for one more question.
Yes, one more question.
One more question. Sir.
The last one.
Yes, sir. You.
I'll take two of them.
We'll take you and the gentleman behind you then, and you can.
You decide who is online.
Thank you, Minister, for the opportunity, and you made some really good points. I'll go back to 2002 about the start of the mission of the German forces and about the resurgency of the Taliban. What actually contributed to their resurgency and what boosted them so much that right now, you know, more than 300,000 forces are not being able to you know, bring them into control or to put an end to the war. What do you think contributed to their resurgence from 2002 to 2003, 4, 5, and 6? one could drive from Kabul to Helmand, but I was there in May. I couldn't drive from Kabul to Wardak. I was reluctant to do so. So how would you put it that what factors actually contributed to the resurgence of Taliban?
Well, I don't know. You could say this, what I called in my speech a spiral of violence, was initiated by too many troops of ISAF. This is an argument of the Taliban and those who are against the whole mission. I don't agree. On the other hand, there was something like a radicalization among the Afghan people after the early years in the 90s. Why? Perhaps in the very beginning it was too much a military mission and not a mission including politics and economics. Perhaps we concentrated too much on Kabul and a central power in Kabul and neglected the multi-ethnic and federal sort of governance in Afghanistan. The comprehensive approach, I've heard that David Petraeus spoke about it, is new for us. It started when? 2008, 9 or 10, something like that. Not in 2002. So it's difficult to say what went wrong, but at least there are lessons to learn, and one is if you interfere, if you go into a country, and nobody told this more convincing than Colin Powell, you take responsibility for the whole country. If you go in, at least you need a concept to come out. Perhaps you fail. Perhaps it takes longer. Perhaps you have to correct your goals. But just to go in without a concept to come out is probably wrong. And we did so. I'm not criticizing this because of this special situation, 11 September, training camps for international terrorists and all this kind of stuff. But the lesson is surveillance and preparation for those missions is of utmost importance, and we underestimated that. And it's too late when you have a mission in a short time to fulfill. So we need to be better in surveillance and to understand the backgrounds of conflicts. It's a shame for all of us that nobody was exactly informed what's going on in the Arabic countries. The best explanation I've read for Egypt was written in the feuilleton. Feuilleton, do you know, is this an English word? Yeah. In feuilleton of a German paper. This remark was about the demographic situation in Egypt. In the political papers, you could read about the army and the armed forces and the strength of Mubarak and things like that, economy. But the background was gifted, well-educated people without work in Egypt, and they wanted a new situation. So this is, I think, a lesson to learn, and it's what we call verschüttete Milch, spilled milk, to explain what went wrong in detail in the early years.
And the last question is the gentleman right there, yep, blue shirt, and wait for the microphone and introduce yourself if you would, sir.
Thank Thank you. My name is Taimur Karimi. I'm a member of African American community here in DC. If I may direct the question towards the Afghan security apparatus, that would be the Afghan National Army and Afghan National Police. Earlier you pointed out the various dimensions of Afghan society, whether it's ethnic, whether it's religious, whether it's regional, or and so on and so forth. To what extent the various ethnic, religious, the various communities of Afghanistan are represented in the security apparatus, Afghan National Army and Afghan National Police, and to what extent efforts are being undertaken so that members of the various groups, particularly the ethnic communities, their first loyalty lies to the state, to the nation, as opposed to their tribal communities.
Very difficult question. But it has to be answered by the Afghan people themselves. This must be an Afghan-led process. It's probably, I used to be the Minister of the Interior. I learned that in America, Minister of the Interior is not a promising title. In political terms, you should translate it Minister for Home Affairs. So when I used to be Minister for Home Affairs, I was responsible as well for education of the police, Afghan police, to a certain extent. And I learned that the status of police in Afghanistan is much more complicated than the status of army. There was no police, national police structure in Afghanistan, ever. We have had local sorts of police structures. So to create loyalty, not corrupt on a low corrupt level, loyalty to a government in Kabul for the police takes long. And by the way, just to make this comment, I'm quite skeptical on new militia structures in Afghanistan. Now to the army. You must, of course, have well, sort of the army must be something like a melting pot for ethnic groups. But this takes time as well. We have experiences, for example, in Turkey. The Turkish army, Turkish armed forces, are very important for the integration of the Turkish society in general in former years, including the fight against analphabetism, illiteracy. Very important. So there was the Turkish army, perhaps something like the school of the nation. There was a huge discussion in Germany decades ago. Is the Bundeswehr a possible school of the nation? In Turkey it was the case. So this is a chance. But on the other hand, you probably, and you are more expert than me, you can neglect it. So, but I think, even if we are really sensitive, we are just unable to have a solution for that. From outside, from abroad, from a European or American or Australian perspective. So this has to be reflected and done by Afghans themselves. But you are right, this is of crucial importance to have the situation stable beyond 2014. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I have to leave for Boston. Thank you for this interesting discussion. And I think we have a lot to learn on counterinsurgency. It's interesting that we concentrated our discussion on Afghanistan. But what about counterinsurgency in Africa? Is Mexico and the Mexican criminality, is this perhaps already insurgency? And what to do there? So we probably need concepts not only, we cannot copy the concepts on counterinsurgency all over the world, but there is a lot to do as well, and a good occasion for new conferences.
And Mr. Minister, we thank you for helping us think about these things and for the commitment of your country on the ground in Afghanistan and around the world, helping to make the world safer and better. So thank you so very much.